They say that the truth has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it, but sometimes it takes a family tragedy to expose the lies that have been hiding in plain sight. My name is Gabriel, and this is the story of how my father's funeral revealed my wife's betrayal and led me to orchestrate a revenge so complete that it changed both our lives forever. Rachel and I had been married for 7 years when my father passed away. We had what I thought was a solid marriage. We owned a beautiful home together, had built a comfortable life, and were planning to start a family soon. Rachel was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Intelligent, beautiful, supportive, and someone I trusted completely with my heart and my future. My father had been battling cancer for 2 years before he finally lost the fight. During his illness, Rachel had been incredibly supportive, accompanying me to hospital visits, helping with his care, and being there for me during the most difficult period of my life. I was grateful to have such a loving and devoted wife during such a challenging time. When my father died, I was devastated but also relieved that his suffering was finally over. The funeral arrangements were complicated because my father had been a prominent member of our community, and many people wanted to pay their respects. Rachel took charge of many of the logistics, coordinating with the funeral home, organizing the reception, and handling the countless details that needed to be managed during such a difficult time. I was touched by how much effort Rachel put into making sure my father's funeral was perfect. She seemed to understand how important it was to me that we honor his memory properly, and she worked tirelessly to ensure that everything went smoothly. Her dedication during this time made me love her even more, and I felt incredibly fortunate to have such a caring and supportive partner. The funeral was held on a Thursday morning in September. The service was beautiful, with hundreds of people attending to pay their respects to my father. Rachel had arranged for a lovely reception afterward at a local community center, where people could share memories and celebrate my father's life. During the reception, I was overwhelmed by the number of people who came to offer their condolences and share stories about my father. I was moving from group to group, thanking people for coming and listening to their memories, when something strange happened that would change everything. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who had been my father's neighbor for over 20 years, approached me with a confused expression on her face. She had known Rachel for several years through various community events, and she seemed puzzled about something. "Gabriel," she said quietly, pulling me aside, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was a wonderful man, but I have to ask you something, and I hope you won't think I'm being inappropriate." I assured her that she could ask me anything, thinking she probably had a question about my father or the funeral arrangements. "Well," she continued, looking uncomfortable, "I was surprised to see Rachel here today. I mean, I'm glad she's here to support you, of course. But I saw her just last week at the farmer's market with a man I didn't recognize. They seemed very close. I assumed she was with her brother or a cousin, but when I mentioned it to my daughter, she said Rachel doesn't have any brothers." My heart stopped. Mrs. Henderson was describing seeing Rachel with another man, acting intimately, just a week before my father's funeral. During one of the most difficult periods of my life, when I thought Rachel was being supportive and devoted, she had apparently been spending time with someone else. I tried to stay calm and asked Mrs. Henderson if she could describe the man she had seen with Rachel. Her description was detailed: tall, dark hair, well-dressed, driving an expensive car. She said they had been holding hands and that Rachel had kissed him goodbye before getting into her own car. I thanked Mrs. Henderson for telling me and tried to act normal for the rest of the reception. But my mind was racing. Who was this man Rachel had been with? Why had she been acting intimately with him during such a difficult time for our family? And most importantly, how long had this been going on? After the reception, Rachel and I went home together. She seemed tired but satisfied with how the day had gone, commenting on how beautiful the service had been and how many people had come to honor my father's memory. She appeared to be the same loving, supportive wife she had always been, which made Mrs. Henderson's revelation even more confusing and painful. I decided not to confront Rachel immediately. I was emotionally exhausted from the funeral and the shock of what Mrs. Henderson had told me, and I wanted to be sure of my facts before I said anything. I also realized that if Rachel was having an affair, I needed to be strategic about how I handled the situation. Over the next few days, I began paying closer attention to Rachel's behavior and schedule. I noticed things that I had previously overlooked or explained away. She had been getting more text messages than usual, often stepping out of the room to answer them. She had been going out more frequently, claiming to be meeting friends or running errands. She had also been more distant physically, which I had attributed to the stress of my father's illness and death. A week after the funeral, I decided to follow Rachel when she said she was going out to meet a friend for lunch. I felt terrible about spying on my wife, but I needed to know the truth about what Mrs. Henderson had seen. Rachel drove to an upscale restaurant across town, where she met a man who matched Mrs. Henderson's description perfectly. They embraced when they saw each other, and their body language throughout the lunch was clearly romantic. They held hands across the table, leaned in close to talk, and kissed passionately when they said goodbye in the parking lot. I was devastated. The woman I loved and trusted completely had been having an affair, and she had been continuing it even during my father's final illness and death. While I had been grieving and relying on her support, she had been betraying our marriage and our vows. But what made it even worse was the timing. Rachel had been seeing this man during the most vulnerable and difficult period of my life. She had been pretending to be the devoted, supportive wife while secretly maintaining a relationship with someone else. She had used my grief and distraction as cover for her affair. I followed Rachel and her lover to a hotel after their lunch. They spent 2 hours together before leaving separately. The evidence was undeniable. My wife was having a full-blown affair, and she had been lying to me about it for who knows how long. When Rachel came home that afternoon, she acted completely normal. She asked about my day, talked about her lunch with her friend, and even suggested we watch a movie together that evening. Her ability to lie so convincingly while looking me in the eye was almost as shocking as the affair itself. I decided that I needed more information before I confronted Rachel. I wanted to know how long the affair had been going on, who this man was, and what Rachel's intentions were regarding our marriage. I also wanted to protect myself legally and financially before she knew that I had discovered her betrayal. Over the next 2 weeks, I hired a private investigator to document Rachel's affair and gather information about her lover. What we discovered was even more devastating than I had imagined. Rachel's affair had been going on for over a year, starting well before my father's illness became serious. The man she was seeing was named David, and he was married with 2 children. He was also significantly wealthier than I was, which explains some of Rachel's recent behavior and her apparent lack of concern about our financial future. The private investigator's report included photographs, video footage, and detailed documentation of Rachel's meetings with David. They had been meeting regularly at hotels, restaurants, and even at David's office after hours. They had taken weekend trips together, with Rachel lying to me about visiting friends or attending work conferences. But the most shocking discovery was that Rachel and David had been discussing their future together. The private investigator had recorded conversations where they talked about leaving their respective spouses and starting a new life together. Rachel had been planning to divorce me and marry David, but she had been waiting for the right time to make her move. The right time, according to their conversations, was after my father's death and the settlement of his estate. Rachel knew that I was likely to inherit a significant amount of money and property from my father, and she wanted to ensure that she would be entitled to half of those assets in a divorce settlement. Rachel had been playing a long game. She had been maintaining our marriage and pretending to be the devoted wife while secretly planning to leave me for another man. She had been using my father's illness and death as cover for her affair, and she had been waiting to divorce me until after she could claim half of my inheritance. I was not just betrayed, I was furious. Rachel had not only cheated on me during the most difficult period of my life, but she had been calculating and strategic about it. She had been planning to steal half of my father's legacy while pretending to support me through his death. I decided that Rachel was going to learn that betrayal and greed come with consequences she had never imagined. I wanted her to lose not just our marriage, but everything else she valued as well. I wanted her affair with David to be exposed and destroyed, and I wanted her to face the full consequences of her deception. The plan I developed was comprehensive and would unfold over several months. I wanted Rachel to believe that everything was going according to her plan, right up until the moment when her world collapsed around her. Phase 1 involved protecting my assets and my father's inheritance. I consulted with a lawyer about the best way to ensure that Rachel would not be able to claim half of my inheritance in a divorce. We discovered that because my father had left his assets directly to me in his will, and because the inheritance had not yet been distributed, there were ways to protect those assets from being considered marital property. I also began moving our joint assets into accounts that Rachel could not access. I was careful to do this gradually and in ways that would not immediately alert her to what I was doing. I wanted to ensure that when I finally confronted her, she would not be able to disappear with our money. Phase 2 involved David's marriage and family. Through the private investigator, I learned that David's wife Jennifer had no idea about his affair with Rachel. Jennifer was a devoted mother and wife who trusted her husband completely, just as I had trusted Rachel. I decided that Jennifer deserved to know the truth about her husband's betrayal. I arranged for her to receive anonymous packages containing photographs and evidence of David's affair with Rachel. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, showing David and Rachel together in compromising situations over many months. Jennifer's reaction was swift and devastating. She confronted David, demanded a full confession, and immediately filed for divorce. But more importantly for my purposes, she also made David's affair public knowledge among their social circle and his professional network. David's reputation was destroyed almost overnight. His affair became the subject of gossip and scandal in their community, and his professional relationships suffered as a result. The man who had seemed so attractive to Rachel because of his wealth and status suddenly became a liability rather than an asset. Phase 3 involved Rachel's family and friends. Rachel was very close to her parents and her sister, and she valued their opinion and approval more than almost anything else. She had always presented herself as the perfect daughter and wife, and her family's respect was incredibly important to her. I began sharing information about Rachel's affair with her family, always framing it as concern for our marriage rather than accusations. I mentioned that Rachel seemed distant and distracted, that she had been going out more frequently, and that I was worried about our relationship. I also arranged for Rachel's family to learn about her affair through other sources. I made sure that people in their social circle became aware of Rachel's relationship with David, and that this information eventually made its way back to her parents and sister. Rachel's family was shocked and disappointed when they learned about her affair. They had always believed that Rachel was happily married and devoted to our relationship. Learning that she had been deceiving everyone, including them, damaged their trust in her and their respect for her judgment. Phase 4 was more psychological. I wanted Rachel to experience the same isolation and betrayal that she had inflicted on me. I began creating situations that would make her doubt David's commitment to her and question whether their relationship was worth the sacrifices she was making. As David faced increasing pressure from his divorce and the damage to his reputation, he began to distance himself from Rachel. The exciting, secret affair that had seemed so appealing when it was hidden became a burden when it was exposed to scrutiny. I also made sure that Rachel began to understand the financial consequences of her choices. As David's divorce proceedings became expensive and public, his financial situation became less stable. The wealthy lifestyle that had attracted Rachel to him was threatened by the costs of his divorce and the damage to his career. Phase 5 involved Rachel's professional reputation. Rachel worked in marketing for a small firm that prided itself on family values and ethical behavior. The company's clients were mostly family-owned businesses that valued trust and integrity in their professional relationships. I arranged for Rachel's affair to become known among her professional network. The scandal damaged her reputation and made it difficult for her to maintain the trust and respect of her clients and colleagues. Her career prospects were significantly impacted by the revelation of her personal conduct. The final phase was designed to bring everything together in the most devastating way possible. I wanted Rachel to lose David at the moment when she needed him most, and I wanted her betrayal to be fully exposed at the same time that she realized she had lost everything she had been planning to gain. I coordinated the timing so that Rachel would face the consequences of her professional and personal scandals at the same time that David's divorce became final, and he chose to end their relationship rather than continue dealing with the complications it had created. The confrontation happened on a Friday evening in November, exactly 2 months after my father's funeral. David's divorce had been finalized that week, costing him half of his assets and severely damaging his relationship with his children. Faced with the complete destruction of his previous life, David chose to end his relationship with Rachel rather than continue dealing with the scandal and complications. Rachel came home that evening to find me sitting in our living room with divorce papers and evidence of her affair spread out on the coffee table. She had lost her lover, her family's respect, her professional reputation, and now she was about to lose our marriage and any claim to my father's inheritance. "Gabriel," she said, her voice shaking as she realized what was happening, "we need to talk about this." "No," I said calmly, "we don't. You made your choice when you decided to have an affair instead of working on our marriage. You made your choice when you decided to use my father's death as cover for your betrayal. You made your choice when you planned to steal half of my inheritance while pretending to support me through my grief." Rachel tried to explain, to minimize her actions, to ask for forgiveness and another chance. She claimed that her affair with David had been a mistake, that she had never meant for it to go so far, that she still loved me and wanted to save our marriage. But I had seen too much evidence of her deception and calculation to be swayed by her manipulation. "You chose to betray our marriage while I was grieving my father's death," I told her. "You chose to plan your exit strategy while pretending to support me through the most difficult time of my life. You chose to try to steal my father's legacy while acting like the devoted wife." The divorce was swift and decisive. Because I had protected my father's inheritance and moved our joint assets before confronting Rachel, she was left with very little. The evidence of her affair and her calculated planning ensured that she had no moral or legal ground to stand on. Rachel's reputation in our community was destroyed. Word of her affair and her calculated betrayal spread quickly through our social circle, and she found herself ostracized by people who had once considered her a friend. Her relationship with her family was severely damaged, and her career never recovered from the scandal. David, meanwhile, was dealing with his own consequences. His divorce had been expensive and public, his relationship with his children was damaged, and his professional reputation never fully recovered. Most importantly, his relationship with Rachel ended as soon as it became a liability rather than an exciting secret. Rachel and David never got back together. The pressure and consequences they both faced had poisoned their relationship beyond repair. They had destroyed their existing relationships for each other, but they ended up with nothing. As for me, I focused on rebuilding my life and honoring my father's memory. The inheritance that Rachel had tried to steal allowed me to establish a foundation in my father's name, supporting causes that had been important to him. I eventually began dating again, but I was much more careful about protecting myself and recognizing the signs of deception. I also learned to trust my instincts and to value honesty and loyalty above all else in my relationships. The experience with Rachel taught me that some people are capable of incredible deception and calculation, and that it's important to protect yourself from those who would take advantage of your trust and vulnerability. People sometimes ask me if I regret the way I handled Rachel's affair. They wonder if I should have tried to save our marriage, if I should have been more forgiving of her behavior, if my revenge was too calculated and comprehensive. But they don't understand what it's like to be betrayed by the person you trust most during the most vulnerable time of your life. They don't know what it feels like to discover that your spouse has been using your grief and your father's death as cover for an affair and a plan to steal your inheritance. Rachel made her choice when she decided to have an affair instead of addressing problems in our marriage or ending our relationship honestly. She made her choice when she decided to use my father's illness and death as an opportunity to plan her exit strategy. She made her choice when she calculated how to steal half of my inheritance while pretending to support me through my grief. I simply made sure she faced the full consequences of those choices. The woman who had wanted to have her cake and eat it too learned what it felt like to lose everything. The woman who had been willing to betray her grieving husband for the promise of a wealthier lifestyle discovered what happened when that promise evaporated and her betrayal was exposed. Rachel got exactly what she deserved, and I got the opportunity to build a new life based on honesty, integrity, and the knowledge that I deserved better than someone who would use my father's death as cover for betrayal and theft. Today, I'm in a relationship with someone who shares my values and understands the importance of loyalty and trust. We've built our relationship on a foundation of complete honesty and mutual respect, and we both understand that some betrayals are unforgivable. The best revenge against someone who tries to use your grief and vulnerability against you isn't necessarily destroying them completely. Sometimes it's simply protecting what's yours and making sure they can't hurt anyone else the way they hurt you. Rachel wanted to use my father's death and my grief to steal my inheritance and fund her new life with another man. Instead, she learned that betrayal during times of grief reveals the worst aspects of human character, and that people who try to profit from others' pain usually end up with nothing. That's a lesson that has served her well in whatever life she's built for herself now. And it's a lesson that has served me well as I've honored my father's memory and built a new life based on the values he taught me. The affair that was supposed to give Rachel everything she wanted ended up costing her everything she had. And the inheritance she tried to steal became the foundation for honoring my father's legacy and building something meaningful from the pain she had caused. Sometimes the most effective revenge is simply letting someone discover that their greed and betrayal have consequences, and that the people they've hurt are stronger and more resilient than they ever imagined possible.